Overthinking doesn't feel like thinking too much. It feels like drowning in 100 directions at once, none of them leading anywhere. This is the story of Jack, a man who couldn't fix his mind by sitting still and thinking harder about it. Because sometimes, the mind doesn't get fixed by thinking. It gets fixed by your hands, doing something slow and repetitive, while your mind is finally forced to be quiet. Jack was 26, working as a junior accounts clerk at a small trading firm, and he had never once, in his entire adult life, finished a day without replaying it at least a dozen times in his head afterward. Did I say the wrong thing in that meeting? Did my manager sound annoyed, or was I imagining it? What if that invoice has an error I missed? What if I lose this job? What if I've already ruined something I don't even know about yet? At night, it got worse. Lying in bed, Jack's mind pulled up old failures at random. A college exam he'd bombed years ago, a friendship that had quietly ended without explanation, a decision he still second-guessed at least once a week. By the time he actually fell asleep, it was often past 2 in the morning, and by 6, his alarm dragged him back into a day he already felt exhausted by. His roommate noticed. "You're always somewhere else," he said once, only half joking. "Even when you're sitting right here." Jack didn't know how to explain that his body could be in one place while his mind was simultaneously arguing with 3 different versions of the future. Money was tight that month, an unexpected medical bill from his mother's checkup, and a coworker mentioned that the fishing harbor 2 neighborhoods over sometimes paid cash for extra hands mending torn nets before sunrise, work that required no experience, just patience and steady fingers. Jack took it purely out of necessity, not wisdom, not self-improvement. He needed the money, and the harbor started work at 5 a.m., which meant he'd already be awake anyway, staring at his ceiling, arguing with himself about nothing in particular. The first morning, an old fisherman named Yaqoob handed him a large, badly tangled net without much explanation. "Find where it's stuck. Loosen it. Then follow the thread until it's clear. Don't pull hard. You'll only tighten the knot." Jack nodded, understanding nothing beyond the literal instruction, and got to work. The net was, without exaggeration, a mess. Dozens of small knots twisted into each other, some so tight they seemed permanent. Jack's first instinct, true to form, was to grab the whole thing and pull, trying to solve 5 knots simultaneously with brute force. It didn't work. It made things worse, actually, tightening sections that had been loose moments earlier. Yaqoob, without looking up from his own section of net, said simply, "1 knot. Not the whole net. You can't outthink a net. You can only follow it, 1 section at a time." Jack forced himself to focus on a single knot, just one, loosening it slowly with his fingers until the thread finally gave way. It took nearly 10 minutes for that single knot. There were, he counted grimly, at least 60 more. He returned the next morning, and the one after that, mostly because he needed the money, but slowly, almost without noticing, for something else too. There was something strange about sitting at the edge of the harbor before sunrise, fingers working slowly through impossible-looking tangles, the only sounds the water lapping against the boats and Yaqoob's occasional, unhurried comments. "Your hands are rushing again," the old man said one morning, not unkindly. "I can hear it in how the rope sounds." "How does rope sound rushed?" Jack asked, half laughing. "Everything sounds rushed when a mind is somewhere else," Yaqoob said simply, and went back to his own section. Jack didn't fully understand it at the time, but he noticed, slowly, that during those early morning hours spent untangling knots one at a time, his mind wasn't spinning through its usual arguments. It couldn't. The knot in front of him required actual attention, and there wasn't room left over for the imaginary meeting where his manager was secretly furious with him. Weeks passed this way. Jack kept working weekday mornings at the harbor before his regular job, mostly for the extra money, though he found himself, more than once, staying an extra 20 minutes even after Yaqoob said he could go, simply because a particular knot was almost finished and leaving it half done bothered him more than being late. One morning, frustrated by a knot that refused to loosen no matter how carefully he worked it, Jack finally muttered, "I hate this one. It's not moving at all." Yaqoob glanced over. "Pull harder, and it never will. This knot isn't stuck because it's difficult. It's stuck because somewhere, underneath, you're still holding 2 ends too tightly at once. Loosen your grip first. Then it moves." Jack stared at the knot for a long moment. Then, almost experimentally, loosened his own grip rather than pulling. The knot, which had resisted for nearly 15 minutes, came apart in seconds. He sat there, mildly stunned, the way people are stunned by something obvious they'd somehow never noticed before. "That's not really about the net, is it?" Jack said quietly. Yaqoob didn't look up. "I only fix nets," he said, with the faintest trace of a smile. "What you do with the thought is your business." 2 months into the harbor work, an actual crisis hit at Jack's real job. A client-facing report due the next morning was found to contain a serious calculation error just hours before the deadline, discovered by Jack himself during a routine check. The old Jack would have spiraled instantly, replaying every version of getting fired, imagining his manager's face, mentally drafting 3 different panicked explanations before even opening the file to see how bad the mistake actually was. Instead, almost without deciding to, he thought of the net. One knot, not the whole net. He opened the spreadsheet, found the first specific error, and fixed only that one, ignoring the rising urge to simultaneously worry about the deadline, his manager's reaction, and his own competence all at once. Then the next error. Then the next. It took him 90 focused minutes, working through the report exactly the way he'd learned to work through a tangled net. One section, fully finished, before moving to the next, instead of frantically jumping between 5 problems and solving none of them properly. He submitted the corrected report 20 minutes before the deadline, with time to actually double-check it, something the old, panicking version of himself would never have had room to do. His manager, reviewing it the next morning, simply said, "Good catch. Thanks for handling this cleanly." Jack went home that night, and, for the first time in longer than he could remember, fell asleep before midnight without a single replay of the day running behind his eyes. Months later, Jack still worked at the harbor most mornings, though the extra money had long since stopped being the real reason. He'd gotten good at it. Quick, careful, patient with even the worst tangles other workers avoided. One morning, a new worker, a nervous teenager named Faraz, sat down beside him with a badly knotted net, visibly overwhelmed, his hands moving too fast, pulling too hard, exactly the way Jack once had. "I can't get any of this to move," Faraz said, frustrated. Jack set down his own net and looked over. "You're trying to fix the whole thing at once. Isn't that the job?" "No," Jack said. "The job is one knot, not the whole net. You can't outthink a net. You can only follow it, one section at a time." Faraz frowned, clearly not fully understanding, in exactly the way Jack once hadn't. Jack almost laughed at himself, hearing Yaqoob's exact words come out of his own mouth without planning it. "Loosen your grip before you pull," he added. "It's not stuck because it's impossible. It's stuck because you're holding 2 ends too tightly at once." That is the lesson this story carries, not from an old man's single afternoon of wisdom, but from months of slow, unglamorous, repetitive mornings that quietly rewired the way Jack's mind handled everything else in his life. Overthinking rarely gets solved by thinking harder about the problem. It gets solved by narrowing your focus to one single, manageable knot and giving it your full attention instead of scattering your mind across every tangled thread at once. You cannot outthink your entire future in one sitting, any more than you can untangle an entire net with one hard pull. But you can loosen your grip on everything else, focus on the one not directly in front of you, and trust that the rest will still be there, waiting patiently when you're ready for it. So the next time your mind starts pulling at 10 different threads simultaneously, your past, your future, a conversation you can't stop replaying, remember Jack's net. Find the one not in front of you. Loosen your grip. Follow the thread. The rest of the net can wait its turn.